some of the loudest critics of the United States are also its biggest financiers. Every day, nations that publicly oppose American interests quietly hold billions in U.S. debt, locked into a system they can't afford to escape. The hard reality is that the rest of the world willingly bankrolls the American government. They do this by constantly buying up U.S. dollars and treasury bonds. So why do sovereign nations continue to fund an empire they cannot control? And why is it mathematically impossible for them to stop? Put yourself in the shoes of a small European country's national treasurer. It is the last week of the month, and you have exactly one job: pay the salaries of every government employee on a single specific day. You could try keeping all that money as physical cash in a vault, but sitting idle, those funds generate zero interest, and inflation steadily eats away their purchasing power before payroll even hits. To earn interest, you hold government bonds instead. You would ideally hold your own nation's debt. But look at this chart representing your shallow order book. When payday arrives and you suddenly dump a massive chunk of bonds to raise cash, the tiny pool of buyers is immediately overwhelmed. Oversupplying a small market tanks the price. You end up selling your bonds for a steep loss, leaving you short of what you need to actually pay your people. To avoid this, treasurers look for two things: liquidity and market depth. This expanded chart shows the solution: a market so enormous that you can sell billions of dollars of debt in a single afternoon without moving the price a single cent. Foreign governments don't buy U.S. treasuries out of loyalty. They buy them because it is the only market on Earth large enough to safely process their basic monthly expenses. Creating a market of that size requires a concrete physical substrate, something the world demands every day. Without this anchor, large financial markets are prone to severe volatility. In mid-1973, the oil crisis hit. Over a 6-month period, the cost of petroleum spiked by up to 400%. At those elevated prices, the sheer volume of money exchanging hands over petroleum instantly made it the single largest international commodity market on the planet. The U.S. Secretary of State struck a deal with Saudi Arabia's King Faisal, ensuring this massive oil market would be traded exclusively in U.S. dollars. To import oil, energy companies everywhere now needed dollars. To hold large reserves of dollars safely, they bought short-term U.S. debt. The U.S. debt market swelled instantly to accommodate the global energy trade. Because petroleum made the U.S. debt market the deepest in the world, that small national treasurer and every other major institution had no choice but to park their money right beside it.
Watching this dynamic take hold, French President Charles de Gaulle famously described the arrangement as an exorbitant privilege. This diagram illustrates the flywheel effect that takes over. As more foreign entities buy U.S. debt for its liquidity, the market grows deeper. That extra depth makes the debt safer to hold, which instantly attracts even more buyers. This structural pillar represents that privilege in action. When the entire world uses your national debt as their short-term savings account, you gain a virtually infinite load-bearing capacity for that debt. Because global institutions are structurally required to buy these bonds, the United States government can borrow nearly limitless amounts of money at zero real inflation-corrected interest rates. Every other nation faces a hard ceiling on what they can spend before their economy fractures. The United States operates without that ceiling, allowing it to easily outspend any geopolitical rival. What does a government do when it has access to infinite cheap borrowing? It builds a global military apparatus. Specifically, this endless line of credit finances the massive, globally projected United States Navy. That fleet serves as the active enforcement mechanism of the petrodollar system. The military's core function is to patrol international trade routes and ensure that oil continues to be priced and sold exclusively in dollars, strictly protecting the monopoly. That same military supremacy is leveraged to manage global oil production, intervening when necessary to limit rogue supply and keep prices relatively high. High prices demand high transaction volumes. That massive volume is required to keep the dollar market deep enough to maintain the liquidity trap that keeps foreign treasuries buying in. This brings us back to the ultimate irony of that small national treasury. In their desperate effort to safely manage their funds and pay their own civil servants, they are directly financing the strike groups that force them to stay in the system. The petrodollar operates as a perfectly engineered, closed-loop machine. The mundane daily necessity of the world paying its bills provides the direct funding for the empire that enforces the rules.